Hello, all you lovely people. Welcome back to the Cinema Asylum podcast. We are so glad that you decided to join us today. If you have seen our past videos and you like our content, please make sure to like and subscribe. And on today's video, I'm doing our little segment just with me today. And for today's review, I'm going to be talking about the new horror thriller film directed by Osgood Perkins, and that is Longlegs. If you have not heard about this film yet, I'd be very surprised because this movie's been marketed like crazy the past couple months or so, and now that it's been out for like about a week now, it's already been out for like 2 weekends, and it's doing insanely well at the box office right now, like surprisingly so. I mean, usually a movie like this from a smaller distributor like Neon Studios, which hasn't even been around that long, but they put out movies like Parasite, and I think they put out I, Tonya too. But they're not really like huge like some of the other big studios out there, and this has been their most successful film like so far as of late. And I'm so glad that they're having this kind of success in the summer for a horror film, no less, and for a horror film like this specifically. The plot revolves around it's basically as you probably heard about the film. It's very much a Silence of the Lambs meets Seven meets a bunch of supernatural elements. It really goes back to those '90s manhunt FBI crime thrillers that you saw, like Seven. And this revolves around FBI agent by the name of Lee Harker, who's played by Maika Monroe, as she is assigned a specific case revolving around these series of mass murders of all these different families across the past 30 years or so. And the movie takes place in Oregon, and it takes place in the late '90s, I believe. And it definitely takes place during the Bill Clinton era, as you see Bill Clinton's portrait in many scenes in the film. So she's assigned this case, and in each of the murders that has happened in these like 30 years of history, an entire family is killed, and it's usually committed by the father figure, and it usually ends in them committing suicide. And it's just brutal murders happening, and in each of these murders they get these letters by this person named Longlegs, and in these letters are written in this very these coded Zodiac killer esque alphabet, and she is assigned this case, and the movie basically is about her revealing how these murders happened, how Longlegs is involved with these killings, and if there is indeed like something supernatural going on that's causing these murders to happen. And that's all I can really get into without getting into major spoilers revolving around what happens in the film. And there's some pretty shocking events that happen in the film and revelations that I will get into in the spoiler section, which I will save for the last part of the video. So, for those who have seen the past episodes with me in him, you know that you probably heard me say that this was my most anticipated film of the summer. I was eagerly excited for this film just because I'm a massive horror fan, and I'm also really into these indie horrors like that Neon and A24 have been putting out, and I love horror movies like this that revolve around like true crime aspects that do in some cases have that kind of supernatural edge to them that set them apart from movies like Silence of the Lambs or Zodiac or Seven. Those very David Fincher-esque films that I love. But I like films that kind of inject something unique into it, like a supernatural or satanic edge. Something like one of my favorite horror films of all time did in 2012, which was Sinister, which also has that kind of true crime story to it, but it has a lot of that supernatural flavoring to it, which I adore. Um, and in my opinion, this movie's been getting a ton of hype, and a lot of audiences, because of how much hype has been around the film, saying that this is the scariest film of the decade, and some people have even said that this is actually one of the scariest films of all time. Is it? Do I think it is one of the scariest films of all time? I wouldn't say so, like specifically, um, but for me anyway, this film is one of the most atmospheric, unsettling, and creepy films that I've seen in many years. I think this film, um, I don't think this film is outright trying to scare you, but I think the main job I think that the film and the main target of the film or how Oscar Perkins was aiming for was to make you as uncomfortable as you could with the atmosphere that the film creates, with the performances, especially from Nicolas Cage, who plays Longlegs in the film, and they've marketed that brilliantly by not showing Nicolas Cage at all in the trailers or the commercials for the film. And they've you've in the trailers you hear him, you hear some of the dialogue that he gives, but they're not giving you the full context of the scenes that those are coming from. And when you see Nick Cage in the film, you will realize why they didn't show him in any of the marketing for this, because what they did to Nicolas Cage in the film in terms of how he looks is something that that people are going to be remembering for a long time, just because if you see him in the film and you didn't know it was Nicolas Cage, you would never have guessed it. That's all I'll say about that. But yeah, I loved how atmospheric the film was. The film immediately from the opening shot just puts you in this uncomfortable mood, in this uncomfortable environment, with the sound design, with the eerie cinematography, and how most of the film is shot with these wide angle lenses. And the camera doesn't really move that much. The camera is mainly just put on a tripod, like you see right here, and it just allows you to suck in every little bit of the settings and the different locations that the film takes place in. And it usually has the characters that are in these frames very small in the frame, a lot of wide shots in the film that make you feel like anything can happen to these characters when they're in these locations. Even when something doesn't happen, it still makes you feel that anxiety that any good horror film should do, or any good psychological thriller should do. Um, there's so many scenes in the film, and I've seen this movie 3 times, by the way. In the past 2 weeks, I've seen this movie 3 times. Each time I've seen this, I've seen it with someone else, and each time there's several shots in the film where it has a character in the center of the frame, like Maika Monroe. There's a scene in the film where she's on the phone talking to another character, and on both sides of the frame, there's these empty corners. There's these empty rooms that you can see in door frames, and you just feel like something is gonna appear on both sides of the frame or on either side of the frame. Like it just makes you feel like that will happen, even when it doesn't. And there's many moments in the film where something does pop up very sudden, like very subliminally, but it doesn't call attention to it. And that's the kind of horror that really just unsettles me. I don't like horror movies that rely on jump scares. I don't like horror movies that rely so much on the over the top musical score, and films that rely so much on like moving the camera so much to where like it's calling attention to the scares, and not allowing you to feel the dread. Um, these are, of course, techniques that have been used by some of the greatest filmmakers of all time, like Stanley Kubrick, who obviously had influenced Osgood Perkins when he made this film. And you can hear him talk about that in interviews, how movies like The Shining and a lot of other Kubrick films inspired this film and how it looks. Um, but yeah, not only did I love how atmospheric the film is, I also loved it almost all the performances in the film. And the acting in the film doesn't, like the cinematography, doesn't call doesn't really call attention to itself much, except for Nicolas Cage, and that's by design. Maika Monroe is very. You can definitely feel like something is off about her. And I won't get into exactly what is going on with that character until the spoiler section, but throughout the beginning of the film, you definitely get the sense that this character has something that is on her mind constantly. Like in um, the film almost immediately sets up that her character has some kind of psychic ability when she's investigating all these scenes and all these crime scenes, and she's going through evidence. You feel like she's in she has some kind of intuition that's giving her this information, and you're not entirely sure how she's getting it until closer to the third act. Um, and I love it. She plays that part so well, in my opinion, and she plays it very awkwardly, like someone with that kind of ability. And when you learn what is wrong with her, it makes her performance feel more authentic, and it makes you feel more for that character, and so much more. You also have Blair Underwood, who plays a very charismatic and sarcastic police chief, or FBI chief in this case. Has a ton of great lines. As really, he really does add a ton of almost comedic weight to the film, even though the character's not like outright funny. Like, you definitely feel like a load is taken off whenever that character's on screen, because so much of the film feels so heavy, and it feels so dread inducing that whenever that character's on screen, you feel like you can have a moment to breathe in whatever scenes he's in. You also have Alicia Witt, who plays Lee Harker's mom in the film, and she gives a fantastic performance. And she really, towards the third act, you really get a good deal of scenes with her. And yeah, that character has a ton of screen time and later on, and she did a fantastic job. So let's get into Nicolas Cage in the film, who, aside from all the makeup, which I've already talked about, I've become such a fan of Nicolas Cage throughout the years, and especially recently, because Nicolas Cage, like a decade ago, was really struggling to find roles that were worth a damn, and movies that were worth any kind of a shit, really. And that's due to the fact that he dealt with tax issues, so he kind of had to take as many roles and jobs as he could, and that's why he was in so many terrible movies the past decade or so. And it wasn't until it was the movie Mandy from 2018 that kind of got him back on the right track, and made him and allowed him to take on more interesting roles and more interesting movies like Mandy or Pig or The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. And it wasn't. And when he took the role of Dracula in Renfield, that was when I feel like he was able to take more of those studio-driven roles that he got a ton of in the early 2000s and the late 90s. And he's still doing really interesting indie and smaller roles like this. And I'm so grateful for it, because he is full out Nick Cage in the film. And it's one of the first times where a Nick Cage performance, when he does go full Nick Cage, where he does go full loony and completely bonkers in a performance, it almost feels like this almost was like the first time I've ever been truly scared of Nick Cage, like in a crazy role like this, because he's had a lot of like more subtle roles, but he's had a lot more crazy over the top performances, and usually in those kinds of over the top roles, he's still kind of funny and humorous. And I'm not gonna lie, some of the on rewatches, some of the scenes in the film revolving around the killer of Longlegs and Nicolas Cage's character and his performance, it can induce laughter for a lot of audiences for sure. But for me at least, most of the film I was just kind of like in awe of his performance. Like I am genuinely creeped out by you. And it's not often that I get that from a Nicolas Cage performance. And I really have to give so much praise to him and the makeup department as well. They for just truly creating a really unique kind of serial killer that you've never really seen before in a movie like this. And yeah, truly got to give it to the film for making me one of the most for making me truly scared of Nick Cage, which I don't know if I've ever felt that emotion from him in any movie I've ever seen him in. So yeah, I really want to get into spoilers for the film. So I'm gonna wrap up my like non-spoiler thoughts on this. Overall, I don't know if this is gonna scare people like the marketing has pointed out, but for me anyway, I was truly the past all three times I've seen this film, it has just put me in a mood and has made me uncomfortable. And any horror film that can do that is doing something right. Where it just you don't come out of the film, you come out of the film and you go home and you think about certain scenes in the story and certain scenes that really just put you on edge. And that's the kind of horror that for me is the most effective. The horror movie that doesn't scare you on, immediacy, but scares you on reflection. And I really do think Osgood Perkins really did a tremendous job in with this film in managing to accomplish that feat. And I'm so glad that this film is doing well and audiences are getting into it, or at least talking about it, because this is obviously not a movie that's going to be for everyone, but it's a movie that's at least going to get a lot of people talking and sharing their experience with it, because you might not like the film, but you definitely felt the film. Is how I'll wrap that up. So I'm giving the film a 9 out of 10. It's one of my favorite movies of the year easily. So yeah, I'm going to get into spoilers now for Longlegs. So if you've not seen the film, I would recommend watching it before you watch this part of the video. So 3, 2, 1, you've been warned. So come to the third act of the film, you realize what Longlegs has been doing and how he himself is never really killed anyone, at least not personally, but he has influenced all these families to kill themselves and to kill other people. And you learn that because of the dolls of the film, because the character himself, and what I heard before the movie came out, and what someone described the character of Longlegs as, is like an evil Geppetto of sorts, because he himself creates these dolls that he sends to these families as birthday gifts, and each of these families that he kills, all get killed on a family member's birthday, most notably the younger daughter. And each and he makes a doll version of each of these little girls, and sends them to these families right before their birthday. And that's where he influences these people using some kind of satanic magic, where he puts that kind of like weird ball into the head of the doll, or these dolls, and that's where the whispers come into play, these demonic whispers that influence these families to start killing each other, and eventually the father killing themselves. So it's just a lot of people may find that that reveal of how like these murders happen, like how it's revolves around some kind of black magic. A lot of people will find that very silly. For me, anyway, I didn't really find it that silly because it just I expected there to be a supernatural element to the film, and I do not think it to me anyway. It never came off as silly or forced. It always had that kind of vibe going throughout. Like this isn't just the standard like serial killings that are happening here. There's something bigger at play, and one of the more eerie parts of the film is whenever that you see those dolls in those black veils that Longlegs wraps these dolls up into. You always see, and you see this in the trailer too, where you see this face, or you see at least these eyes that emerge from the faces of these dolls underneath this black cloak thing, and they're red, and you at a brief glance you wouldn't even be able to tell it's a face, but when you look closely at it, it just immediately, for me anyway, like you see that in the trailer, and when you look at it closely, it just, for me anyway, it just made me feel so uncomfortable. And I love stuff like that where you almost have to look closer at the screen until you see what's truly there to be frightened of. And I love stuff like that in the film. And it does that kind of thing all throughout it. And you also see um, the I don't know if it's actually Satan himself, but it's some kind of demon form that you see all throughout the film in the corner or very far away or tucked away in the shadows. Like especially near the end where it kind of does that exposition revolving around how Longlegs works and how these killings all take place, and it's delivered by Alicia Witt's character, and it's you see a young Lee Harker when you realize that she was almost going to be one of the victims of Longlegs, and because and I think it's because that Alicia Witt, who plays the mother Ruth Harker, because she wasn't able to be influenced to kill Lee as a child. That caused Longlegs to interfere with her, and that caused her to basically sacrifice herself in a way to save her daughter, to save Lee Harker, and that made her become his accomplice in carrying out all these mass murders with these families. And you realize that she is bringing each of these dolls to the families that were killed. And yeah, and in one of the shots that you see of Lee Harker as a child, she's in her bedroom. It's very dark, but right behind her, she's in the bottom corner. She's in the bottom half of the screen, and you see just emerging from the darkness that those horns and that very tall black form coming out. It's so well done, and it just makes you, it just gives you the creeps, or at least it gave me the creeps. Just stuff like that just really gets under my skin. Stuff like the movie really reminded me of the first time I saw Hereditary, the first time I saw Longlegs at the premiere, and I went to see this movie with Paul from the show, and it just immediately when it does that, just it made us feel uncomfortable and just always feeling like almost like we're being watched as we're watching this film, and I love that stuff, you know. And of course, now that I can talk more about the character of Longlegs and what Nick Cage looks like in the film and how the part he plays in it, and he's not in the film as much as you might think he is, but I think he's in the film just enough because the film does a very good job of not really showing his face, and when you do see his face, it in the beginning in the beginning part of the film, like in the opening scene, which immediately sets the mood for the film and just immediately this is one of the best like opening scenes for a horror film I've seen in a long time, where it's Longlegs approaching Lee Harker's house, and she's a child, and he's giving her the doll. But you're not it what's great about the movie is that the scene is kind of spread out all across the film in different parts, and revealing different pieces of information that help you piece along what's actually happening here. And there's a part where Longlegs is not really shown. His face isn't shown, but you see it from like the nose down, uh, and you don't really see his face that much until Nicolas Cage in the frame ducks down in the frame very quickly, and then it smash cuts to the title. That was the moment where me and Paul looked at each other and were like, this is going to be one of the best films of the year. Like, good God. I love the opening scene of this film so much, and it just immediately puts you on edge for what the rest of the film is going to bring you. And it establishes the mystery of the film very well, because you're not entirely sure who the kid is unless you really paid attention to the marketing. You're not entirely sure who it is, but over the course of the film, you realize that little girl is Lee Harker as at a younger age. So yeah, and you eventually find out that Lee Harker has the reason why she has all these psychic abilities is that she because her mother has worked with Longlegs. Lee Harker herself has been influenced by these demonic voices, like the devil himself has been talking to her mentally and psychologically, and the devil himself has been giving her these visions, as I'd like to call them. And the moment of the film, the turning point, is when Ruth Harker, when after Longlegs kills himself in that interrogation scene, which is amazing. I mean, Nicolas Cage's performance in that film, in that scene in particular, is just, it's awe-inspiring. Full Nicolas Cage going full out in that scene, especially, and doing all those weird Nicolas Cage movements. But it to me anyway, it never came off as like funny. It always came across as like genuinely unnerving and kind of terrifying. Yeah, Longlegs kills himself after he delivers the line "Hail Satan," and yeah, he kills himself right there, and he's out of the movie. And that's like towards the end of the second act, and you're wondering where's this gonna go for the rest of the movie. And Lee Harker goes back to her mom's house because Longlegs mentions her mother and asks her to get her to tell more about what's happening here. And you eventually find out that, yes, Ruth Harker is the accomplice of Longlegs across these past couple decades. And Ruth Harker shoots the doll of Lee Harker, who she has kept, and she shoots it in the head. And she does that in a way to free her from the effects of Satan himself. Is how I pictured it, and that's where you get the montage of the exposition and what's happening here. And the ending is where Lee Harker goes to the birthday party of Blair Underwood's family, because he has a daughter who's turning 9, and she gets her own doll. And Lee Harker goes into the house, and the mother's there, Ruth Harker's there, and it's just a really uncomfortable scene, and you're not, you know it's coming, but you almost feel like the characters are powerless to stop what's coming, because on first watch I had an issue with the ending, because it seemed like Lee Harker at any moment could have just done something to the doll, and that would have like stopped the family from being killed. And that would have, stopped what eventually did happen, was that everyone gets killed except for her and the daughter. But she cannot shoot the doll after she shoots and kills the rest of the family. And I feel like that at first on first viewing, I thought that was a cop out. Like it felt kind of like a forced way to have like a kind of like the good guys lose and evil prevails kind of ending. But I think on the third watch, which I watched it again yesterday, I thought about it differently, and I feel like the ending was not really about what Lee was able to do, in that what she was not able to do, and because when she walks in that room with everyone inside and the dolls there, you already feel like it's already too late. Like everyone is going to be influenced by these whispers and these by the demonic doll that is already there, and it's already too late, and already evil has prevailed. And for me anyway, on multiple viewings, I feel like that ending makes more sense to me. And I've heard some complaints about the ending too, of what I was saying, like it felt like kind of a cop out and it felt kind of forced. But I think the more I watch it, the more I will like the ending and more appreciate what the ending is going for. And the ending of the film is just Nick Cage going, "Hail Satan," and then it cuts to credits. Yeah, this film really impacted me in a lot of ways. And for me, I think the film did exactly what it should have done, and I think the film lived up to its potential. The film might not have scared me in the way that maybe the trailers might have led me to believe, but like I said, any horror film that makes me this uncomfortable is doing something right. And it's definitely not the type of film that's going to scare everyone, or it's not going to affect everyone like it did me. But I still recommend any horror fan to see this film and try to get something out of it at least, because I do think it's still going to start a conversation about what everything that happens in the film, the performances, all the technical accolades that the film has. I mean, this film is truly gorgeous to look at. The score is immensely creepy. The sound design is great. I think it's a truly great film and one of the best, probably my favorite horror film of the year. And there's been a lot of great horror films this year in general. But I truly think this film might stand out above the rest. And we've still got quite a few horror films left this year, throughout the rest of it. So I'm very excited to see what we've got next in store. So that's my review of Longlegs, spoilers and non-spoilers all across the board. So I hope you guys enjoyed my discussion of Longlegs, and I hope you guys have checked it out. And if you enjoyed this video, I recommend that you guys like and subscribe, and keep on coming for more. So take care.
We have been the Cinema Asylum Podcast. You guys were awesome. Thanks for coming out. Good night.